I'm going to talk about the Seneca Falls Women's Rights Convention. You will hear women feminists talking about this great Seneca Falls Women's Rights Conventions, and I maintain that it was not a great convention. It was laughable and stupid. And I'm going to tell you, after having read the minutes or notes from the convention, why it is stupid, and you're going to agree with me as to how stupid it is. So there was this Seneca Falls convention in Seneca Falls, New York. It's near where I live. I've driven by it many times. Maybe they have a museum there. They got signs up talking about it. And they did a convention which was more than one day, and they had like 7 items on the agenda that they wanted to address. And the 7 items on the agenda, most of them were just absolutely ridiculous, stupid things that have nothing to do with sexism, and it was just idiocy. For example, one of their agenda items was they wanted to prohibit women from working in circuses. That's idiotic. Why do they think that they have the right to tell another woman that she can't work in a circus? They had the belief that somehow working in a circus was demeaning to women, and they wanted the practice to be stopped. So another outcome of this, one of the other things on the agenda was that they wanted, this is one of the 7, the circus was one of the 7, there's going to be another one of the 7, they wanted men to encourage women to speak up in church. That was one of the other agendas out of the 6 or 7 for this conference. They need to tell the man that they want to speak. They need to, if you want to speak, the man has to encourage them. Is the man going to encourage them when they don't want to speak? There has to be a desire in that woman to speak. She has to communicate it to the guy, yeah, I want to speak. Well, if you, having that desire and communicating it to your husband, you're halfway through the battle of speaking up in church. If you can speak up to your husband, I think you got the guts to speak up in church. I think you can do it. Do you really want to put the onus on men to reduce sexism by telling men you have to tell women to speak up in church? It is just absolute nonsense. But this is what was on the agenda in the Seneca Falls Conference, the Seneca Falls Women's Rights Conference. Another one was, perhaps it was the right to vote. And New York State's voting law, I don't know when they wrote this law. The voting laws were crazy back then because there was no history of voting in the world, because nobody knew who the candidates were. People didn't know what was going on. They didn't know the government didn't affect the average person. They lived on their farms. They could care less about the government. Nobody voted. So, or maybe you would vote in different ways, like at your local, at the school, or for the mayor or something like that. So there's lots of different ways to vote. And the voting laws were just horrible because there was no need for the average person to vote. The average person would not be capable of voting for the reasons I explained. They didn't know anything about candidates or policies, or what was going on, the costs involved, traveling, leaving their family behind, all that. How would they know they're not going to receive a letter in the mail saying, hey, you got to vote next week. How would they know? How would they know when it's time to register? How would they know where to vote? If they said, here's the address, how would they know how to get there? How would they get there? They didn't have cars and buses and radio and TV. They didn't know how to read. Impractical for people to vote. But women were demanding the right to vote. The laws were crazy. In New Jersey, it was legal for babies to vote. It was legal for animals to vote. It was legal for people who were mentally ill to vote. It was legal for foreigners to vote. It was legal for everybody to vote. In New York, the law was men over the age of 18 could vote. But I don't know if that was at the foundation of the state or when it was enacted. But I know that law was on the books. So they were in New York State. They were probably specifically concerned about that law. They might not have cared about federal laws. There were no federal laws restricting them from voting. So they must have been, and maybe they spoke about it. I didn't read the whole thing, Maybe I did read the whole thing. It was a long time ago, but I'm telling you the gist of what happened. But the thing that's weird about it is that women already had voted in the country. You can't say that they hadn't voted before. There are records of women voting before the Seneca Falls Women's Rights Convention. How can you say that women don't have the right to vote when they've already been voting and they have a history of voting, especially in things like school board elections, and they tended to have an active interest in the community where men did not vote? So then another issue was they wanted to be able to go to a university. Well, there's another problem with this. The first woman to graduate from a university graduated before the Seneca Falls Convention. So how can you say that women do not have the right to attend a university when a woman has already graduated? Second, I even think that it's possible that an all-women's university existed before the Seneca Falls Convention. I'm not sure. Or it existed shortly thereafter. I think the dates are really close. But they were clearly not denied the right to attend a university. But it's something that came up during the convention. And how, obviously, if someone graduating, how are they going to know? They're not going to know because there's no communication in those days. How do you even organize a conference? It must have been really difficult to organize a conference. So there were probably other details about this conference. There was like 7 things. I think I mentioned 4 of them to you. And the voting is huge. Attending university is huge. I guarantee you the other ones are not going to be as big as voting and attending universities. But when a woman says, oh, the Seneca Falls Convention, the great convention, women are, you know what? Go read about it. When you finish laughing, you can go back to those women and say, maybe you should read about the convention before you pitch it as some great moment in feminist history, because it's not the great moment that you think it was. I have read feminist literature from colonial America. Go to a feminist, they're going to know the names of these writers. I've heard them name these women. I look them up on a computer. Some woman spouts some name. Oh, these great feminists. Look it up, read the literature, and I say, what this woman says is exactly what I believe. But it's not what modern women believe. Modern women don't believe what feminists in colonial America believe. They do not believe that. A colonial American woman wanted equality. She wanted to be independent. She wanted to have a good job, and she wanted to work. And she didn't like being put on a pedestal. She didn't like men taking care of her and doing everything for her because she wasn't learning the skills that she needed to have that job and do what she wanted to do. That's not what a modern woman believes. A modern woman wants the man to pay for everything. She wants the man to pay for dinner. She wants the man to make more money than her. She wants the man's job, but she doesn't want the man to have a job. She wants to take the job away from a man. That's not what colonial feminists believed. They wanted opportunities, but they didn't want to punish men. They didn't want to have anything taken away from men. They didn't want to have extra rights. They didn't say, I need 50% more. I want 100%, you get 0%. They didn't say those things. They wanted to have the same education. They wanted men to treat them in a way that they had that independence, not being put on a pedestal, so that when they were able to get a job, they had those skills from being independent. That's what they wanted. And you can go and read the feminist literature and verify that you're going to agree more with that colonial feminist literature and that the modern women do not agree with that.